All right, and we are live. Welcome, fiends, to Handle with Scare, presented by the Slash and Cast Podcast Network. We are a show discussing horror movies and the phobias that they emphasize. With me tonight, as always, are my co-hosts Holly Hooch and John. So, guys, here we are. We just kicked off Aquaphobia just a couple of days ago after a slight delay with our release, all in all. But just as a reminder, we have a 2-month phobia for the first time, and this is quite literally a deep dive in this case, both in setting but just also in longevity, since we haven't done this quite as of yet. So I am your host, Emily Drunk, and tonight we have John's selection for Aquaphobia. So John, why don't you go ahead and quickly introduce what we'll be talking about, and we'll get underway pretty shortly.
So Underwater was my pick, and I picked it because I had seen it a while ago and really liked it and wanted to watch it again, and it went with the theme, so I had to pick it again
Mhm.
and for rewatching. And it's a movie where Kristen Stewart works in a sort of underground or underwater drilling facility, and they have an accident and starts flooding and they have to survive, and then there's a monster element that we'll get to that starts to come into play, and yeah, and so I also wanted to pick it because it's, as horror fans, we know that there's a ton of horror movies, especially now, coming out all the time, and yet most of them are pretty bad and not
Mhm.
really rewatchable.
Right.
But this is one of the in the top percentile of legitimately good horror movies that have come out in the last several years. And I feel like it definitely flew under the radar because of the pandemic and everything. I know you were meant not to steal your info, which I wasn't aware of. It was made in 2017.
Mhm.
That's
And it's supposed to come out. But we were just talking about that before. But I knew it has a 2020 release date, which is also bad. I mean, they delayed it from 2017, but then they picked the wrong year to actually put it out because
Yeah.
the pandemic pretty
And then-
much wiped it out.
And didn't it come out like in what's that worst month? Like
January. It was January that it came out.
Mhm.
And so I mean, in one thing that everybody talks about was it was that merger that occurred that basically shelved the movie back in 2017, and so it got released in 2020, which makes a lot of sense because I remember thinking, didn't T.J. Miller get canceled?
Mhm.
I was like, oh wait, it was made in 2017, so that made a lot of sense.
TJ Miller playing his TJ Miller character that he plays in every
The man
movie that
baby.
he's in,
The man
basically.
Mhm.
Cloverfield or Deadpool, of course.
And the TV show.
Yeah.
I can't.
What?
Silicon,
IT Crowd? Or
no, Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley. I couldn't believe it. I forgot that the name of that show. I actually watched that show. I finished it too. The ending was a little anticlimactic, but whatever. What are you gonna do? But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Underwater.
Yeah, so just a couple of general podcast reminders. As you know, we've been doing watch parties on Stream Lounge every Thursday. That has been Thursdays at 9:30 p.m. Pacific time, and tomorrow we'll be watching Frankenhooker via Stream Lounge. And I've also been kind of like doing double features on Mondays as well. I know some people say 9:30 Pacific time, a little bit too late. But I've also been doing double features on Mondays on Stream Lounge, starting at the 6 p.m. Pacific time. So you can find like our full schedule up on Stream Lounge on that end. And of course, we kickstarted Aquaphobia last week with our original versus remake discussion for Piranha, and we're basically going from creatures to underwater monsters with tonight's, and I'm looking forward to next week too, because it's been quite some time since I've actually sat down to watch what Holly has in store for us next week. But let's talk about Underwater. So looking at the cast, we have Kristen Stewart, who plays Nora Price. We have Vincent Castle, who plays Captain Lucian. The aforementioned T.J. Miller, who had been canceled since this point, plays Paul Abel. You also have Jessica Herwick or Henwick as Emily. She's probably most notably known recently from like Iron Fist, one of the many Netflix Marvel series.
Oh
Uh,
gosh, all right, here she's in.
yeah, she plays the biologist in the
Yeah, yeah.
movie. You also have John Gallagher Jr. as Liam Smith. And you got a couple other characters in there who don't really survive all that long, like Rodrigo in this case. But anyways, let's set the stage. So as John had mentioned, uh, basically Underwater is set in like this underwater city, and obviously it's 11,000 meters under the sea in the depths of the Mariana Trench. And it follows this crew of this deep sea drill as they are dealing with the fallout of this catastrophe that happens, which is basically an earthquake that destroys the integrity of, the walls of the drill that they're on, and they're basically trying to, fight for survival in this case. So basically what ends up happening is, they're basically trying to like resurface throughout the majority of this movie, but of course things go awry fairly early on in the movie, as they encounter like these human looking like fish creatures, that seem to be a little bit thirsty for violence. And of course, why wouldn't they? So, we have this theory in the movie about like, okay, well, like what exactly happened? Liam says that basically like the shift in the ocean floor basically opened up a bridge between like two ecosystems, one of which was home to, these predators that we see.
Hulu.
Similar to Piranha Double D, of course.
And you have Emily, who was the research assistant who was brought on to like study marine life. Explains, that earthquake that happened. Yeah, that was entirely us. Yeah, so that's a feels bad. So it's kind of like they're at fault for everything that's going on in this, but of course, you have like the big corporation who's like trying to deny everything when all is said and done, like most any like big corp would do. But basically, what ensues, I guess, essentially can just be seen as the ocean taken back. And there's like a lot of damage that goes on throughout the course of this movie, but at its core, this is a monster movie.
Mm-hmm.
And there are quite a few parallels to this movie and Alien.
Yeah,
which is fantastic, and I'm sure that's one of the things that a lot of horror fans are going to appreciate. And I don't know if you've seen any of like the concept art, John, that they had kind of like been doing up for this. But initially, this movie didn't factor in the behemoth that we see towards the end of the movie. So there's been a lot of discussion amongst the community about whether they kind of just like sprinkled that in, or whether or not this movie was secretly just a Lovecraftian love story at its core. So it's interesting.
Well, it's funny you say that because the first time I watched this movie, I didn't know anything about it. I just heard about Underwater with Kristen Stewart. So I watched it knowing nothing. And, it's a standard kind of action underwater story. And then it starts adding in the creatures, as you said, the smaller humanoid creatures. And I still wasn't really making the connection. And it wasn't until the very end of the movie on my first watching, not to jump ahead, just to summarize, but that, in spoilers, that I was like, wait, is this Cthulhu? And then as they showed it more and the action scene proceeded, I was like, okay, that is definitely Cthulhu. And that's pretty great. And I started thinking about it. And then that's why I wanted to rewatch it, because it's one of those stories where it's kind of like the twist ending sort of changes things. And it was a good movie anyways, but I wanted to kind of rewatch it knowing, is this literally a Cthulhu story? I had the same exact thought myself when I watched it was, did they just sort of tack on Cthulhu for fun? Or is this literally meant to be like an ode to Cthulhu and take place sort of in the Cthulhu mythos? And not to like, well, I don't know, we obviously have time to talk about stuff, but so rewatching it, my determination is yes, I'm a huge fan of Lovecraft and I've read a ton of his stuff. And I think this is actually meant to be a Cthulhu movie. It might have been applied sort of after the fact, but there's enough references and sort of little Easter eggs early in the movie that confirmed it on the second watch that, like, oh yeah, this is, because like it's very quick, but in some of those underwater monster shots, it's really dark and there's the silt kind of floating around everywhere. But there are shots where you can see like sort of Stonehenge looking structures, and like there's an entrance to a cave where one of the divers gets pulled into, and it's got this kind of constructed built entrance to it. It's not a natural cave entrance, and I was like, oh, okay, there's the little clues that and I also realized on the second viewing that those little the humanoid creatures that we see at first are deep ones, is what they're referred to as. And deep ones are pretty much depicted in the stories the same as they are in the movie, where they're these smaller human-sized, human-shaped creatures that basically sort of tend to Cthulhu's temple, and they sort of protect him and tend him because, of course, as you may know or may not know, as viewers may know or not know, Cthulhu sleeps at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and eventually he will wake up and destroy the planet. And
Cthulhu.
but and so yeah, so sorry not to like.
No, go on. I love this.
And I don't want to. Also, just to quickly,
I'm interested.
I was thinking too. Is this story connected? Like, is it just sort of like a Abyss alien type of story, but they added Cthulhu? Or is this kind of actually based? Is there any kind of Lovecraft story that this actually sort of matches up to? And there is actually a Lovecraft story called The Temple, I'm pretty sure. I haven't read it recently, but a long time ago. But and it's a story about it takes place in the early part of World War II, and a German sub sinks a American warship, and the warship damages the sub before it gets sunk. And so the story is about this German sub that sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and the crew members and the captain, they start hearing knocking and voices coming from outside. And eventually in the story it's the captain, but he eventually puts on a diving suit and heads out into the walks out and then comes across a temple, and there's a light inside the temple, and then the story basically ends with him walking into the temple.
That's nuts.
And so I think that's essentially what we've kind of got here in a basic. This is sort of an updated, sort of modern version of that.
That's pretty neat.
In a sense, vaguely.
So it was more of a, like, they put an alien twist on Cthulhu. There we go. On HP Lovecraft.
Yeah. But technically, Cthulhu is an alien. He's a physical creature, a kaiju.
He's a cosmic entity.
Yeah.
That was some hardcore nerding.
I know.
Well, to bring it back, so obviously I mentioned, like, it does take quite a bit of cues from Alien. So in both cases, you have the crew who initially encounter the monster in kind of like its infant form, where you have like this fetal creature, unlike anything that like the crew has witnessed before. This movie also has like the contrast of like the tight claustrophobic spaces up against like the agoraphobic vastness of the ocean, since a lot of it does take place at the very bottom of the ocean as they're trying to walk to the next port or whatever. And like the monsters that we see underwater, they're kind of like gelatinous, they're pallid, they're very bony, and they have like this really like elongated body. Kind of like an oarfish. They got like the clouded eyes. They have needle-like teeth as well. Mm-hmm. And we do eventually see like later on that they do kind of like cling on to the behemoth that we see in the background, which we don't get to see until like the flare gun comes into play in the third act. So it's just like very early on, like you obviously something bad is about to happen, and you start to see these creatures, and you don't really know, what the big bad is when all is said and done. So you have like this apocalyptic event that could occur because like there's this unprecedented skill in the third act, which of course you mentioned ends up being Cthulhu in this case. But one of the things that I really appreciate about this movie is just the fact that it wastes absolutely zero time to get into the action and to progress the story, which we can't say all that often. Just genre in the genre alone, but like for this type of setting too, there are quite a few movies out there that have like their lull periods in like water-based movies. This is not one of them. Like immediately, shit's going down on the drill with the earthquake, and you have the immediate panic, people waking up trying to just escape the drill site, but of course there's only a limited amount of pods, so I always appreciate a movie that just gets right into it, and that's one of the reasons why it's such a standout. Like, yes, I did enjoy the third act of the movie, and just the fact that like that was not something that I had even thought about going into the movie, just based off of what we'd already seen from the trailers. So that definitely more whet the appetite, but like it was also just a thing of like, man, I just wish I kind of expanded on that a bit more. But like I think had I known it was that type of movie going in, I don't know if I would have felt as high praise about the movie after the fact. So I like that they kind of kept that part of it hidden until the very tail end of the movie, because so often nowadays so much of the movie is actually given away before it actually comes out. And despite the fact that this was shelved for 3 years, it's not like we had a bunch of like extra details about the plot or anything like that either.
Definitely. No, I agree. In Alien and in all the movies that are sort of influenced by it, Event Horizon, Leviathan, all the movies in this kind of genre. This movie is almost, it has its own subgenre of like the underwater facility,
Right.
which has the creature attack, and then of course its sister genre, the same thing but in outer space with Alien and Event Horizon and things like that. But it's like most movies would feel beholden to sort of do what Alien did, which is set up the characters in the beginning and all quiet and everything is normal, and then everything goes haywire.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, they just said, I feel like they said, like, these movies, like, know what this is. We're just going to start at the good stuff and just go from there, basically.
I'm glad that they didn't, there's that cliche that always happens in this subgenre of movies, which is, oh, well, there's always going to be one really greedy or scared person who's going to ruin it for the rest of them.
Yeah.
And then, the guy really wanted to hate.
Yeah.
And they kind of stayed away from that entirely. Everybody was very selfless, and everybody was trying to help each other out. And, and I thought that was very nice, because you don't usually see that. I mean, that's also like an element of every like zombie survival movie.
Yeah.
So now that I think of it, it's like, oh, that was kind of nice that they didn't have to tack on any extra bells and whistles to like getting you to hate somebody.
It felt like it felt like they were gonna do that with the captain's character,
right? Because he was part of the Roebuck. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, the Roebuck.
Yes. So you get the sense that he knew what was happening. He was holding back, but they still made him such a likable character, and all of them were such kind of sad characters, because you got a Kristen Stewart's character who has lost her fiance, or died, or
I don't know how
left. They broke
I'm
up.
not even sure
Because she wears that and then the captain has lost his daughter, and so everybody has a sort of like sad reason why he decided to leave society and just work in the Mariana Trench.
It's funny you mention that, because they
T.J. Miller got canceled. He had to go work in the Mariana Trench.
but they do. So that's kind of the nice thing I like about some modern movies, where instead of setting everybody up in advance, they kind of do the thing where throughout the story you get little bits of
Yeah.
it, and then
Which is a
kind
natural
of get it, which they did with the captain's character, where at the end she finds the memorial thing about his daughter because he was saying she's 14, and they're
She
like,
was
no,
big.
she can't be 14, and all of that. And they kind of put it in, sprinkle it in. Instead of giving it to you all at the beginning, which was nice. Although the funny thing is, I almost felt like you didn't even need it. That the movie is
Yeah.
so well paced and done with the action and just trying to survive and get through the situation,
Mhm.
that stuff was almost kind of like, I don't even. Yeah,
I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was just like,
yeah, it's just kind of, it didn't really play into the overall story, and it was kind of like, it's here because they feel obligated to put it in. I think.
yeah, I get your point, but it was kind of nice. It just gives you a little extra warm and fuzzy feeling about a little bit too many more character development. So
Yeah.
you care more.
Yeah.
Although if it happened before he died, I might have been a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, where they reveal what happened with his daughter, but he was already dead.
Yes, you're like,
And
oh,
you're like, okay,
wait,
well,
this
this
bad
kind
minutes
of
ago.
doesn't matter. Like, I feel bad for saying it, but
Huh?
it's like, okay. But yeah, no, and yeah, I believe have seen it more than twice, but I've seen it twice now, and I'm still not sure. I know she lost. They either broke up or they died or something.
I'm pretty sure he died because, like, even later on, like when she's saving Emily when they're like I wouldn't say fighting over one of the escape pods. I mean, Kristen Stewart's character already had her mind made up that she was going to be the one to stay
Yeah.
behind in this case, but she made that comment about like how she would give anything to just have like one more moment like with her husband. And that was the reason why she wanted Emily to take the pod
Yeah.
after she
I
decks
don't
her in the face because she wasn't going to listen otherwise.
Which, that's that weird, like, Hollywood thing where, like, the person won't do it, so they, like, knock them out, and then they do it, and it was like, really, like, weird, like, what? That's so weird. Like, why did they even do that in this? Like, it's not something that they would do, and it's there because it's like a Hollywood.
It felt really awkward for sure.
Yeah, and it didn't even knock her out.
Yeah, she was like,
ow.
Yeah, then she immediately apologizes after.
I know. And I swear, like, not to jump ahead too far because we're talking about the end, but and I was thinking, there's room for both of them in there. They can squeeze in there.
That too. I'm like,
Yeah, and also, and the other thing it made me think was, and don't give me this BS about like you can only activate the escape pod from the control room.
that's not how it
And
works.
it's like, no. You're going to set up the escape pods so that you can activate it and then get in it and then escape. Like, it's not, someone has to stay behind.
With somebody
Okay,
has to stay behind,
regardless of that, this is one of those movies that you have to like put common sense aside because there are multiple elements of the story, like I don't know, walking a mile at the bottom of the ocean in these pressurized suits.
Yeah.
Yeah, not.
I just want to say, I think we have to coin. I used this term before in a previous episode, but I think we have to coin the term Hodor, like Hodoring, because like every horror movie or these types of horror movies always have to have that Hodor scene of I'm gonna stay behind and like keep the door shut while you escape. That's.
And they made it necessary because if it hadn't been for her, then the creatures would have caught up to the pods. And although she didn't know that, to your point.
And this movie is sort of a sci-fi movie. It takes place a little bit in the future, just
Like
to point
2050?
out, because those suits are definitely very science fiction-y and look like Alien a lot.
One of the newspapers was, I think, a date on one of the newspapers was 2050.
Oh,
but
nice.
In the first issues on the Roebuck or the second final one. But either way, that wouldn't have been too much of a time difference because the captain was on both. So at most, like 5-10 years. So in the 2050s.
That's and
yet she's still using a regular toothbrush.
They had that they have that kind of central meeting area like you have in
Oh,
movies
sure,
with
yeah.
the soul. And it was funny because there's a like a jellyfish hanging in the above it. And for the first few moments during that scene, I thought that it was the holographic, the 3D holographic
Oh.
display thing.
Mhm.
And then I realized, oh, it's just like an actual jellyfish
Just
hanging.
decorative.
It's not a 3D holographic display.
That's pretty good.
But yeah, no, they the- definitely the walk as well as you say, as you mentioned, like that's sort of a trope, and that's the thing about this movie. Kind of been saying is like it's very straightforward, very basic and simple, but it's just well made,
Yeah.
and so it ends up being a really good movie, even though it's super basic in terms of, and really like not doing anything original, really.
Mhm.
Absolutely
You know?
right. I mean, it was super enjoyable, but to your point, like he knew absolutely everything that was going to happen before it happened.
Yeah, so
And
you have like the natural disaster element with the earthquake. You have part of the crew who's trying to make contact with people on the surface, of course, unsuccessful at that. And like the captain's just like, all right, well let's walk a mile across the ocean floor to the Roebuck 641, in hopes that they could basically resurface from there. But of course, right out of the gate, things do not start on a good foot. You have a defective helmet being worn by Rodrigo, and we actually see him implode,
ooh, that was rough.
which was fantastic. And all that's happening as they're trying to descend down this freight elevator. Of course, we also have this distress beacon that they find, like lower on the surface by one of the escape pods that is down below. And of course, they go to investigate it, and of course that's where they find a body hidden amongst the rubble. And that's kind of like when we got our first look at the creature designs in this movie, because you see the creature emerging from the body's back. And of course, you have Smith and Paul who are getting attacked, and Smith ends up killing the creature, where, they take it inside to examine it. And that's when they have like that whole conversation of, this is unlike anything we've seen before. Well, I killed it, so I get to name it, and they argue back and forth about that. But
I was just thinking that was one of my favorite parts because the biologist this entire time has been like such a scaredy cat. She's so afraid of absolute. I mean, she's not trained for any of this, right? And she doesn't know how these. At least Kristen Stewart as the electrical engineer.
Yeah.
Or at least she's familiar with
She's
the
an
structure.
engineer.
Right. She's an engineer. She's familiar with, the mechanics of this and that. Not the biologist. She's freaking the fuck out. But then as soon as they bring this ridiculously gross, scary ass fucking monster into the fucking hatch, she like takes off her gloves and is touching it with her bare hands. I'm like, gross! What that is? It's just like, look at this. Look.
And then of course it jumps.
Yeah, a little bit. But
Which-
then she goes,
And that's the section too where I think a lot of people probably might just be like, "Oh, this is just an alien ripoff."
Yeah.
Because the creature
There's
comes
things
out
in
of
it,
the
yeah.
dead body's chest
yep.
and attacks, and then they bring it in and look at it. It's all very much like that scene from that section of Alien.
No kitty cat though.
Yeah, no cat. Yeah, they don't have a
there's no cat. There's a bunny.
Oh, that's right. There's a bunny.
Yeah, but they don't do the trope of the false jump scare because a pet jumps out like the cat jumps out, which is kind of its own thing. But yeah, and the creatures are really good. I
Yes,
like the
scary
creatures.
shit.
They're on one hand, they really look like the deep ones, which Lovecraft never really drew or like depicted them visually, but there's kind of a standard look that a lot of people will sort of make them look like in artworks, and they definitely kind of went with an artwork that while original, like goes along with other artist depictions of those creatures. And I love the way that they try to swallow you head first.
Mhm.
They can open up their whole, kind of like those fish that open up their mouth really wide, or like almost like those sharks, those mega sharks that they don't eat meat. They just open up their mouths really hugely and pull in.
It was basically Deborah Logan, is what it was. in recent episode terms.
Except I got the job done.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to swallow them in
Snake
the
style.
same way.
Yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, they're all kind
was
of
great, though, for
gelatinous
sure.
and kind of weak though, which was nice. You could kind of squish your
Kill
way
one
out
at a
of them.
time.
Yeah.
Just push her way out.
Which she did.
Well, she had like a flare gun or something. Yeah.
Mhm.
That
Um,
was good.
and of course, there is just to call out. This is a modern horror movie, but they did have a bit of smut for the horror viewing audience. There is Kristen Stewart running around in a
Panties
bikini,
and-
basically panties and a bra, bikini kind of.
Well, you can't squeeze clothes into those suits.
Yeah,
That's how you make them. So small and a size 0 lady, you can't be wearing clothes in your fucking suit. That's supposed to be like for everybody.
and TJ Lavin had his disintegrating underwear, like his stuff.
All right, so I'm trying to think where we're at. So we just had the creature examination, and then after that, they make their way back to the seafloor, and they have Kepler who explodes above, and nearly like buries them with debris. In this case, you have Smith who actually gets hit by debris, but ends up getting saved by the captain and Price. And they eventually go inside this access tunnel to like the intermediate station, where they're able to change, they're able to like clean out their suits that they've been wearing. But unfortunately, throughout all of this, we have one of the oxygen scrubbers that had been badly damaged by the debris that had fallen. So basically, like they're going through here, and of course, there's another creature attack that happens. Where you have Paul who gets dragged underwater and gets killed off. So, it's like one by one, these creatures are like picking them apart and just like isolating, getting the kill, and then not really wasting too much time playing with them or anything like that. I mean, like the thing with the oxygen pods is just the fact that like, well, if you keep using that, you're basically going to suffocate from the explosion's toxic fumes in this case. So there's of course like the trope that we see in a lot of like war movies with like the no man left behind type of mentality. And the crew are like, all right, well, we're just going to drag Smith along during the walk since he can't really do anything.
Well, that's her lover. Right? Have they already involved her?
It seemed like they're right, like they sort of alluded to the fact that
they have a romantic
relationship.
And then, of course, it's so funny when you were saying about how like the movie doesn't do anything. You knew who was going to live and who was going to die. I was surprised a couple of times, but ultimately it's like, yeah, these guys are going to for these two.
So,
well, I mean, it's not like it's a big crew either.
No. It's a big facility, and there's only a few people. I guess, well, it was implied a lot of people died that we didn't see. But yeah, it's a very small cast for such a huge facility. But, that's okay.
That's okay.
Deal with that. I mean,
I don't mind.
I mean, Alien was a giant ship with a crew of like 5 or
That's
8
true.
or whatever it was.
But I mean, like, this is a drilling expedition, which means you probably need quite a bit of people to
for
work
sure.
that.
But we did see some random dead people. Remember,
That's
when
true.
they had to crawl through the section, and they received people that were stuck under there.
Under rubble.
Definitely claustrophobic.
No, the movie did such a good job. I was really impressed, and like you were saying about the pacing, and I hadn't noticed in the middle of it because it was just so smooth. But I thought back, I'm like, you're absolutely right. I mean, the story carries you along so well, which is really interesting because you got Kristen Stewart, who's her wheelhouse is this very like stoic acting style, right? That she kind of that's kind of her thing, and works really well. She's really good at it. But so you've got stoic Kristen Stewart, in this very action propelled. That was me, sorry. In a very action-packed movie, so I thought that was pretty great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Yeah,
you
no,
could also see her in a new release because she's in Crimes of the Future, the new Cronenberg movie.
oh,
Good
nice.
for her.
Yeah, yeah. Is she good at that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoy that movie. We haven't actually talked about it on the podcast, obviously, because it's a limited
Right.
release right now. But for the most part, like you kind of know what to expect because it's Cronenberg and it's body horror.
Gonna get into this. Sorry, here we go.
And then also I have to point out because it's like I can't help but point out the fact like how derivative this movie really is. It's like when you do, it's just like Gravity too, where you kind of have the initial disaster and then they have to travel to the other station because the other station has the escape method that they need, which isn't on the main ship, and so they do that exact thing in this movie as well.
But didn't Gravity come out around? Gravity come out. I think it came out around the same time as
Before.
this film.
Yeah, I think Gravity's like 2000.
Oh,
Came out a while ago.
okay.
It was 2013.
Okay, 13.
Okay, so yeah, slightly before, so that makes a lot of sense.
And but and not to like heap too much praise on this movie, but it almost kind of reminds me of like a movie like Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road, where you have this extremely basic story, but it's just like it's paced so well that you just like it doesn't matter that it's so basic because you're never bored. You're really never bored. There's no, like you were saying, there's no middle slow part where they all like sit around sort of.
Well, maybe when she gets to that little shed station and like she finds, the captain's belongings and stuff. Oh wait, what was going on with that? Because remember, like somebody was like, "What about this place? Let's go here," and he was like, "Oh, that doesn't exist." But that was the stuff. So.
Oh, that I think he meant it got destroyed during.
Yeah, well, I mean, like that Shepherd station was basically abandoned. I mean, Price was the only one there at the time, and she was rummaging through the locker, and that's when she found like the old blueprints. And like on those blueprints of like the drilling site, he had like the pentagram etched in that location. I'm assuming like that's where like he had seen the behemoth.
But didn't he say that there was nothing there and that they shouldn't bother going?
Yeah, I was just lying to him.
Yeah, that's what. Can we talk?
Wait,
about
was there? Did you say there was a pentagram?
Yeah,
it looked kind of like it. Yeah,
I didn't notice
I think it was a pentagram. I mean, it was, but I thought because there was the back of the locker had the map, and there was all these like lines on it. I didn't actually identify it as a pentagram, but.
Oh, is it? I totally missed it. Is it a pentagram or is it maybe possibly that symbol that's associated with the Necronomicon?
Oh, that's a good point.
There's a symbol that looks like a pentagram, but it also has like extra stuff in it, and it's sort of if you're looking, there's a Necronomicon kind of famous symbol. I wonder if that's what it is. Now I got to go back and.
Now I kind of want to put it on right now.
Yeah, we'll have to double check. But we forgot to mention, there was at one point where Price is getting dragged along by the captain. And you kind of like have that like sacrifice moment in that scene because they're surfacing very quickly, and because of the increased pressure differential, they're both at risk of dying in this particular moment because they're going to surface too quickly. With the pressure being too high, so the captain just like let go, and she's like I can't in this case, and then eventually we see him just kind of like fall into the depths below. That was like such a great scene too, and very impactful, and just like Paul Kristen Stewart's just like I can't do it, like I gotta save you, no man left behind, because they had that mentality all the way through, so.
And I really like that actor, the French actor.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, I forget, but he's in probably his biggest role is probably, at least that we would know, is Black Swan with.
Oh yeah, he's a director.
Corman, but he's in one of my favorite sort of. it's not like a guilty pleasure movie, but it's another movie that's like better than it should be. But he's in Brotherhood of the Wolf,
Hmm.
which is
Great.
a really great, weird, just odd
Standalone.
movie.
Like,
Yeah.
it has
I'm,
sort
I'm,
of, well, let's not get into that.
I'm pretty sure it's on Shudder right now.
Yeah.
It's just a fun movie where you think there should be more of them, but it's just one. And you're like, how are you just by yourself? Why aren't you a trilogy?
Yeah, exactly. How come there's not more? Well, not to like go on a sidetrack too much, but that director who made Brotherhood of the Wolf was supposed to make another movie that would have taken place in San Francisco during the 1800s, and it would have been like the whole kind of Big Trouble in Little China, like Chinese people in San Francisco and like magic and
That's
sort of Brotherhood of the Wolf, but in San Francisco. But it never got made. He wanted to make it, but never was able to.
brought up my hope.
I know. But that movie. Which, speaking of directors, I never looked. I should have looked, but I didn't look at who directed this movie or what else they've done. But I
didn't
mean,
recognize any of
they're really good. You know, and not to like knock the writer. The writing definitely works too, but I feel like it's the directing and editing which are the real kind of stars here, maybe because of the pacing and the way it's shot
Editing
and the
is so
cinematography. Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny. Like when you got a good editor, you can sort of forget that there's editing. But when you got a bad editor, that's all you can think about.
Mm-hmm.
When you're checking your watch, you know, at certain points in the movie,
Or
it's
like your
which is left.
or changes are like jarring. You're like, what just happened? Like, how do we get to this scene now?
And also, I have to give him credit for keeping the movie about an hour and a half and not extending it to like 2 hours.
Oh my God. I just watched Batman. That was a really fucking long movie. It was good, but it was like.
And that's the thing with the pacing, you know, it's like not extending it too much, not inserting too
That goes our entire fucking evening.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, 3 hour movie. But
Let's not get into other movies.
Yeah. So all the meanwhile, you know, the destination that everyone is heading towards is the Roebuck. You have Price, who's basically alone at this point, you know, walking across the ocean floor. She does eventually reunite with Emily and Smith, who, you know, is still getting, like, dragged along on the floor. And, you know, eventually, like, they're right outside the Roebuck, and that's when they encounter, like, the nest of the humanoid creatures that are, you know, dangling from, you know, above. And, you know, they have that moment of, like, trying to, like, sneak by, but Emily's oxygen alarm starts blaring off, and, you know, Smith, the poor guy, is just like completely out of it, and you know, he just makes a comment about it, like, "Oh, that can't be good." And sure enough, all of these creatures who were sleeping start to wake up because, of course, they are. But I love that shot because you see like the red light strobe kind of like effect. You know, you see the destination. It doesn't look that far away. You just see like all the tentacles like draped down, and you're just like, "Oh man, can't really rush into this one." So, like, the whole time, it's just super intense because you know they have to, like, maneuver to the point of, you know, just getting across, like, this bridgeway. And as soon as that alarm goes off, you're like, oh, fuck.
I like that shot where she's moving through all the sleeping creatures and one of their claws kind of slides across the front of her helmet, which is really cool. And yeah, they're all kind of sleeping and waiting to wake up.
And then, of course, that leads to the very badass moment of the film, which
yeah, the big
so satisfying. Like scratching an itch. You're like, yes.
I know. I was so glad, you know, going back to the first viewing when I didn't know anything. I was like, you know, this is a cool, like, before that happened, I was like, this is cool. Like, it's a good movie, but it's kind of a standard, like, there's little monsters out there that are attacking us and everything. And then when they finally went with the big kaiju monster and it's Cthulhu, then it was like, oh, okay, this
that was
is
so
awesome.
cool. That was very, very
cool.
And like and then they all, you know, and all of the art related to H.P. Lovecraft and Cthulhu. It's always the enormity of the monster compared to the very tininess of the human. And they definitely work that angle, and it's, I don't know, that also scratches.
Yeah, I think that you could have had that shot, right, where you see like the tiny little.
There's like her. It's, I think, well, one from there, I don't know what you call it, but it was that exterior place with, it's almost like not a tunnel, but like a railway.
Yeah. And he's in where the part where he's kind of initially coming out of.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. And that was the part where I was like, is that Cthulhu, or are they just sort of
Cthulhu
stealing the design a little bit? And then it was like, no, that's definitely meant to be Cthulhu for sure. Like, that's, even though they never say it at any point, it's like, it's definitely meant to be. Yeah.
And that was, and just coming to, that was very exciting too, when you kind of, it dawns on you that it's Cthulhu.
And the realization being that they have, what they've done, and they don't say this outright, but what they've actually done is drilled into the temple of, it's called Relay. It's pronounced different ways because it's spelled in a strange way, but the city of Relay and Cthulhu's temple, that essentially they've accidentally drilled into his temple and woken him up.
Good job, guys.
Which is great, because it's like
which is a good thing.
It's great. It's only going to spell the apocalypse. Yeah.
Well, and I have to point out something that this just reminded me of, is that the biologist character, she has a scene where she says, like, Mother Nature is fighting back. Like, we're not supposed to be here when we push things. Okay, so in movies, usually when a character does that, what they're saying is correct. Like, they're actually like telling that's like the writer telling you what this is supposed to be. But the funny thing is she's actually wrong. Like, they didn't, like, I mean, you can sort of interpret it that way, but literally they just accidentally drilled into Cthulhu's house and woke up Cthulhu, and now Cthulhu's going to rampage across the planet. Like, it's really not Mother Nature. This isn't an environmental story where, because this could have been just a story where it's environmental, where they literally did accidentally cause an
like Piranha 3D.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, well, no, this isn't really Mother Nature. This is Cthulhu. This is an actual cosmic being. Yeah.
He sucks. This wasn't on you. Fully on him.
Yeah. This isn't like because you were drilling for oil where you know.
Cthulhu's killing you because of Cthulhu.
Yeah, he's just mad that you woke him up. That you accidentally dropped a drilling station into his house.
But I do love the ending about how, which is funny when you bring it up like that, where it's not this environmental sort of wrongdoing. That aspect of the movie where it's just like this gigantic, horrible monster god, and then versus this greedy corporation that's just gonna keep coming and coming and coming until there's not a red cent to be made. And so that was kind of not a cool feeling, but like a monster versus monster kind of feel to it at the end, where you're like, oh shit.
And then I thought, please, like, this will never happen. But please let this movie, there's no reason at all why this movie cannot be part of the same universe as the King Kong and the Godzilla movies. Because it's literally like the same concept. And so can't we get like a movie with kaiju, Cthulhu fighting Godzilla and King Kong?
You're gonna die right away. There's so much more
of that whole universe, and not only that, but the end credits of the movie have that kind of news thing, like the opening credits of the King Kong and Godzilla movies. You know how they've been doing that with the Monarch organization and everything with those movies. It's like,
wait, you're gonna have to remind me. Can Godzilla swim?
Yes.
He can't. Yes? They show him on the boat in the latest one.
When you're like, why can't Cthulhu fight Godzilla and King Kong? I'm like, well, because a fish can't marry a bird, John.
Cthulhu's got legs. He can walk on land and come out to this.
So that's just something my mom used to say to me sometimes. It's Spanish, in Spanish, and she was like, "Yeah, a fish can't fall in love with a bird." I'm like, "Well, they could live on the beach." Oh, no. The saying is like, "A fish can fall in love with a bird, but where would they live?" But then my answer would be like, "On the beach." Maybe they can fight on the beach.
Well, I mean, we got that Guillermo del Toro movie where the fish man falls in love with the woman.
There you go.
Yeah, The Shape of Water.
She grew some gills and she went into the water. That's considered a horror movie? Is that right?
I know. I know that was part of the whole water. When I was kind of looking around at water horror movies, they were including that. It's like, that's not a horror movie.
Mhm.
That's a romantic thriller.
I mean, there's a monster in it, but it's not a horror movie.
But it turns out it's man.
Yeah.
Who's man a whole lot? Oh, damn, what a twist.
Sorry, that's just my favorite joke from Futurama. It was like, I can't remember if they were like, it was a spoof of like Twilight Zone. And at the very end, like the real monster, some guy walks up. Turns out it's man.
And the real treasure was the friends we made along the way.
Yeah, that's the other one.
Oh, man.
The deep ones we met along the way. Oh, those guys were so scary.
I like how they had the CGI display of all the deep ones swimming towards the thing.
60 meters till contact.
It's like really like that felt like, just to give a little criticism, that part was very like, they must have felt like they needed to show the audience, because you kind of just see the sphere, the escape sphere, just kind of take off and disappear, and it's like, okay, they're gone.
Yeah, they're gone.
The funny thing is when it initially took off, you see like a couple of the creatures start to swim after it, and I was thinking, oh, that thing is moving so fast, and they got such a late start, they'll never catch it. And then you see that graphic, and it's like, oh, they are going to catch it. Yeah. It's like, okay, they put that there so that we can feel like they're still in danger, but we know they're going to escape. They're going to get out.
And the ending was very satisfying too. Like I really appreciated the note that it ended on. So Kristen Stewart is, she has that like inner monologue, right? That's going around, that's been around in the movie. And she says like, I can't remember the exact words, but she says something along the lines of like, you start feeling the fear and this and this and that, but then you got to realize they're just feelings, and sometimes you just got to do. Yeah. And so she kind of turns off that part of her mind that's telling her to freak out about the fact that she's about to die, and then she like kind of sets up the ending to overload forget the science and explode.
It's a nuclear core overload, yeah.
So the energy's got nowhere to go.
She's gonna overload the dilithium crystals.
And then as death is closing in on her, as things are blowing up, she has this like very calm happiness to her face. She's got that little smile, like it's like she's going out in a big bang, and it's like how many people get to end their life in such a dramatic, over the top way. And it was, I don't know, I got goosebumps. I liked it.
Every time I get to that speech, though, the only thing I can think of is Optimus Prime. But, in this case, she actually dies. But, sometimes you just gotta light it up,
It gave you that little bit of a feeling of, like, sharing in the character's courage. Mm-hmm. And that was nice. That was really nice.
But, it was like, as we were saying, it's like, I feel like she could have fit in that escape pod with.
It's the Titanic door all over again.
Yeah, exactly.
There's enough room for everyone.
She didn't have to sacrifice. She could have gone after. Although, in fairness, I was thinking that explosion's not going to kill Cthulhu.
No, but it won't, because it's even in the stories, Cthulhu just regenerates.
Yeah, he's too powerful to be taken out that easily. And, he's going to probably rampage.
Cthulhu's going to Cthulhu.
It almost reminded me of the very end of Cabin in the Woods, where finally waken the elder god.
Oh
and
yeah.
it's sort of that last moment of it coming out and getting ready to smash
Sigourney
everything.
Weaver, by the way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which
Why can't I be Sigourney Weaver?
those suits were very alien looking.
With the lights on the
Yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
it was very But I mean, like I think it was they very clearly leaned into it
Mhm.
and just kind of unabashedly like, you know what, Alien rock. You'll thank me later.
And really, it ultimately is different than Alien because Alien's a much slower paced, more tensiony haunted house type of movie, where this is more action survival kind of feel to it. You know,
Mhm.
a bit more of an
Right.
action adventure movie than
You're right.
Alien.
And there was like this sort of sense of like hand-to-hand combat
Mhm.
in an Alien that,
Yeah.
of course, I mean, well, you get it in this one too because
But
of
very
the deep
little.
ones, but really the big reveal
Mhm.
of like that insurmountable uh, challenge when you face our dear Lord Cthulhu.
Yeah. And of course, we have to, and just to, as usual, not to keep all the praise on this movie, but of course, very tropey ending to like, we're gonna.
everything.
It made me think of Star Trek because in Star Trek they always overload the dilithium crystals in the ship to blow up the ship, and it's like we're gonna overload the reactor core and blow everything up. Like ending, it's like start the count, and of course, Alien ends with the same type of thing. Start the count. Start. I forget where this isn't my own idea. I think I read this somewhere, but it's like, why are all these places built with self-destruct devices? Like nobody, like when we have oil rigs like out in the ocean. There's no self-destruct device built, or like this shuttle.
What did we do here?
Like the International Space Station doesn't have a self-destruct sequence, or something like that. It's
Oh
like,
my god, I'm having a really nice time, guys. No, you're absolutely like, why are you able to do this?
why is that so easy to just blow up the whole?
You know what? I would agree with you. But why do cars go up to like 200 miles an hour sometimes? They're really nice ones, Like, is the manufacturer really expecting you're going to go that fast and drive off the road?
But yeah. So,
But no, you're right.
Cthulhu. But I appreciated that though too, because I feel like these movies and Hollywood in general, I feel like what this movie would have normally done is sort of have Cthulhu-esque elements,
Yeah.
but then not really lean into it. Like just sort of be like, oh, maybe you can sort of interpret this as Cthulhu-y, but not really.
So, I mean, it would be kind of fair to maybe start a little side conversation about the other H.P. Lovecraft movies that kind of came out. So, The Color of Space.
Cover, Outer Space.
Yes.
With
Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage, which is actually pretty good.
It is really good. But I mean, that I feel like there's like I'm trying to connect the dots in terms of the timelines because that came out fairly recently, like 3 years ago.
And maybe a little longer than that. I think
Maybe a little longer.
5,
than
6 years,
5, 6.
maybe.
Okay, so then, but definitely after this one, I'm just trying to see if like the grouping works in my brain about like the movies that are coming out that are paying the homage to Lovecraft.
Lovecraft is
And
always
the intentionality behind them.
even though there's not a lot of Lovecraft stuff out there in terms of movies. I mean, there is, but there isn't. But it's also one of those things where he's in the public domain, so you can freely use his stuff in your stories. So, but yeah, I was impressed that they kind of leaned into it, and even though they never say Cthulhu, they do make it clear that
They don't
it
do the
is.
D.
And if you're familiar with his stories, like I say, like you can see that those are deep ones.
I didn't know that either. I mean, when I was researching the movie a little bit after watching it straight up everybody was like, "It's this," and I was like, so I've never like read any Lovecraft. I've been aware, been watching the movies, and then of course, there's a lot of adaptations in general, not just in movies, but it had to be spelled out for me for sure.
Yeah, it is a bit hidden. Where if you're not, like you say, if you're not familiar with Lovecraft, then you could like not realize what it is. But at the same time, I think you probably figured it out for yourself at the end.
Well, at the end, when the creature comes out, you're like, that's Cthulhu, all right.
Yeah. They show his face like
I know,
a
it's
few
like,
times
oh,
where it's like the full on
officer.
tentacle face.
Yeah, I know our Dark Lord and Savior when I see him. That's definitely Cthulhu.
I'm trying to eat him. But yeah, I mean, I know enough to know that, but I've never actually read the text. And some of other reviewers, like FoundFlix, actually did a review on this, and the dude actually read a passage, which was actually very popular in some other reviews, of reading this passage of a particular story, which I can't remember the name of now, but which kind of ties in exactly with the movie. So it wasn't.
Is it the one about after strange eons, even death may die? That
It's the one about how the passage about how basically
fear of the unknown.
how science is hasn't hindered us till this point, but there will come a time where these terrifying mysteries of the world will become known, and
Yeah,
and we'll run back to the dark ages
that's
because that's the only thing that we can, make ourselves feel safe with.
yeah, that's the opening of Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, that's what that's what
Which
they
is
read.
basically about how we sort of live in a sort of merciful ignorance of like the real vastness of the universe, and
It's a good
that
shit.
we basically science will sort of put us in a position where we're going to basically
Yeah,
destroy ourselves because
our
gonna,
psyches.
yeah, we're going to sort of make ourselves realize things that we shouldn't be thinking about or
But we can't help
experiencing.
ourselves.
Yep, we're too greedy.
And I think that's the same one too, that where it has that his famous quote about fear of the unknown, that like the biggest fear of mankind or something like that is fear of the unknown. Quote that you see a lot, like
That's fear of the unknown.
But yeah, Call of Cthulhu. It is a little bit like Call of Cthulhu too.
Now I gotta read it.
where That's a story. I mean, not exactly, but in a very basic sense, that's a story where some sailors travel to an island and then they realize that, this is Cthulhu's temple and it rises and he comes out. They all,
There he is. Natural bodies of water. And
yeah.
to be fucked with.
Yeah, Lovecraft had a fear of sea creatures.
Me too. Kind of an asshole too.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a whole nother
That's a
thing.
whole other.
The best thing, though, the best Lovecraft fear and creature that he uses in one of his stories is his fear of penguins.
What?
He obviously thinks penguins are weird, creepy creatures because
They're adorable. Although I heard they're not nice to pet because they're like slick, like oily.
but he uses them as creatures in at the Mountains of Madness.
At the Mountain of Madness.
Which,
video cut out.
Oh, here we go. Sorry,
go.
that was
Sorry.
on me.
But yeah, which is another Lovecraft story that The Thing is.
Ooh. All right. Well, this was so fun, and I
You learned so much about Lovecraft today.
I know.
Yeah.
I have to read some Lovecraft now.
When I was like 13 or so, someone
Sounds
said,
right.
"Oh, there's this writer H.P. Lovecraft that you have to read," and so I started reading them and read all the stories.
I like that's like the very perfect writer for like an emo-ish. Not that you were. We know what
So
everybody-
basically, what John is saying is he was going through a phase at the time.
yeah, it fits in.
Definitely young teens is like to get into
Love
to
to
Lovecraft and stuff. Yeah, and that was close to the time because when Reanimator
Mhm.
came out in the theaters, and I that's one of my all-time favorite movies. I love that movie. Another great Lovecraft.
Can we create a fear month that so that we can watch Reanimator?
Fear? How about like fear of doctors or surgery or something like that?
Mad scientist.
Fear of science.
Fear of science.
Yeah, I'm sure there's something like that.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
All right, well,
What's
looking.
that again? He was in The Frighteners, and he was in Castle Freak, and
Jeffrey Combs.
yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah,
I
he's
like him a
great
lot.
genre actor.
He's wonderful.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So looking ahead next week, we're doing Creature from the Black Lagoon. That would be the 1954 version, directed by Jack Arnold. And man, it has been a long time.
Never seen it.
Yeah,
I've never seen it. I'm super excited. Well, I'm sorry, T. I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you got something else to say?
No.
Okay, I was just gonna say that stylistically, it's so famous, right? And it influences so many different genres of. I don't even know what it like subcult. It influences so many subcultures. For people that are really into like tiki subculture, that's a huge thing. And so it just dawned on me, I feel like I know the story, but I've never seen it. And John, we were actually talking about it right before recording, and you were saying how it's one of the few Hammer
or Universal.
monsters that didn't get like a whole series.
That was
of
just the
movies.
one movie. There's no Creature from the Black Lagoon 2 or 3. Unlike Frankenstein and Dracula and the Wolfman and even the Mummy got multiple. They all got a bunch of movies, but for some reason, Creature from the Black Lagoon, which is iconic, only
Yes.
got the one.
And I can guess the story because of course it's I'm guessing I can guess the story. I'm guessing there's a couple, maybe one of them's a scientist, maybe there's like research going on near a lagoon, or they just get out. He gets killed. Creature comes out, sequesters the woman, maybe takes her to a special lair, and then later like she has to run away. I haven't seen it. This is me guessing the movie. And then people have to come and like rescue her, and they kill him. And is he a nice guy like Frankenstein? I don't know. Maybe he's just straightforward, scary the entire time. Who knows? There's a little bit of, and we talked about this too, which of course we'll get into when we watch the movie. But the terms monster boyfriend.
Yeah, no, there's
And
some
bodice ring, which I can define a little later.
Oh yeah, no. We were talking a little bit before where there's kind of this thing, and there's a YouTube channel, Lindsay Ellis. She has a video called "My Monster Boyfriend," I think, but it's a whole kind of essay about horror movies where you have this kind of thing of the sort of like the Guillermo del Toro movie we were talking about, Water, where you have the monster and the woman is maybe a little into the monster, like maybe it's not so terrible.
And then in romance novels, the term bodice ripping, which is taboo, but it's basically a rape fantasy. So it's those are like kind of difficult topics, but they're things that people think about, So I feel like I painted myself into a corner.
All right. Well, rather than diving into more details there, let's wrap up the show, and we'll talk about that more next week, and we'll see how right you are about what you assume is the plot. So anyways, if you guys are looking to contact the show, the best way to do so is to find all of our video content on our YouTube. That would be at Handle with Scare Pod. To keep up to date with everything going on here, you can also find us on Twitter at Handle with Scare. And of course, you can email the show and contact us there at handlewithscarepod@gmail.com. Now, that being said, you've been listening to Handle with Scare. This has been episode number 63. We'll be back next Wednesday talking about the Creature from the Black Lagoon. I've been your host, Totally Drunk, joined as always by my co-hosts Holly Hooch and John, and we'll see you guys back in a week. Y'all take care.